Welcome back to Strange Form. Today we're going to be looking at NECA's Alien Romulus Xenomorph XX121. One of the ones that I made a basically unfriendly video towards a while back, but now that it's in person, we'll see how I feel about it. As for why I'm so late on this particular one, I have been looking for this one almost since it first came out, and one of the biggest problems I ran into is how many of these have been returned to the store broken. And I'm not kidding, I have photos. There have been so many of them that have been returned to Target and put right back on the shelves with broken tails, broken arms, broken legs, parts rattling around in the box. This one evidently is a disaster when it comes to its ability to actually stand up to any play. And so I've been a little bit concerned about picking up at all, but also have not been able to find it, at least one that would have been a working copy for a reasonable price. Now, some of the record stores and FYE places like that, they had copies of it, but they wanted between $70 and $80, for it. So the price was ridiculous. There's no way I was going to pay more than, $40 for it. And so I finally came across one that had a fairly good paint job and wasn't busted and had never been opened. So we'll be looking at this one. As for why there's been such a hiatus on the channel, I'm going to explain that, but if you're just tuning in or you just want to see the Alien review, you can spin on. But it's three reasons, really. Reason number one, our family vehicle basically developed a whole mess of problems back to back. And they were all things that I couldn't ignore and that I had to fix. Now, I don't take anything to the mechanic. I work on my own car. If I could afford the dental tools, I probably would do all my family's dentistry too. But I don't really trust anybody else. Too many mechanics have made too many mistakes in the past, and I haven't met many that I really, really trust. And so it's often cheaper for me to just do the work. And I saved us about $7,000 because the things that needed to be done were, it needed a new solenoid pack, it needed a low drum compactor, like the entire thing went bad, no reverse, no nothing. And if getting that out without removing the entire transmission is a difficult task. And then on top of that, it had one of the rocker arms go bad, and it basically caused one of the lobes to actually sort of wear to a degree, where a portion of the camshafts were not working correctly at all. So I had to actually take out all the camshafts, replace a few of them, and repair some of that damage, and actually did some damage to the camshaft cover as well, and it was leaking. And on top of that, one of the other classic problems with our vehicle is that the oil filter housing, right where the oil goes through to be cooled, it develops a leak around some of the washers, which causes drops in oil pressure and everything. So basically it was like a Rube Goldberg machine of tragedy in the vehicle. Basically one after the other just went wrong all at once. And so no money for toys and no time to do these videos. And I needed to get all of it done before winter struck, because it didn't sound like a fun idea getting the thing up on jack stands in the snow and getting out of the vehicle and doing all of that work. So basically that's where I've been. The second issue, it has been just getting things in a timely fashion. I'm a small channel and I don't have a lot of access to anyone who can get me anything early. I try to pre-order everything. Every single thing I have ordered that I've wanted to review has come in late. Every place I've ordered it from has delivered it late. It's been way at the back end of where anybody else is reviewing it. Like, I just have been getting things last. Well, one of the things that I was going to review was the tank from the ramen company, and that thing still hasn't materialized, and I probably won't see it until probably after Christmas. And I had pre-ordered the T800 and from the T800 from Hot Toys, and was planning on doing sort of an expose on the T1000 and the two T800 figures they did all in one video. So you can see all three of them all at once. And those two still haven't come in either. So, as well as the Romulus Alien from Hot Toys, which I'm still waiting on. So the fact of the matter is, I just can't get things as fast as others. And so I'm at the back end of a lot of the reviews. And the third and final thing is, I kind of had to take some time to figure out whether or not the channel was sustainable. Like, this is expensive. A lot of things I buy, I resell afterwards, so that I can afford to keep doing it. And if I'm not getting a hold of them quickly enough and there's no one sponsoring the channel, basically I run into a problem where I'm selling things way at the back end where there's not as much demand for it, or I'm reviewing things and it's not making anything in the algorithm enough to actually sustain the channel. And so I really had to do some soul searching as to whether or not it was worth even going forward. So I'm going to do a couple more videos. We'll see where it goes. But if things, don't pick up at least at some point, I may need to actually drop the channel or just do maybe a couple reviews a year. We'll see where that goes. Anyway, without further ado, let's look at the Alien Romulus version of the Big Chap. As I mentioned in a previous video, and most of you know, I did sell most of my NECA aliens, but I did hang on to the Giger version. It's one I really liked, and so we can kind of compare sculpt and everything to this one and see how different this one actually is to the original sculpt of the Big Chap. I know that Romulus took a bunch of liberties. I'm not quite sure why. You could probably do some backflips and say in its metamorphosis it was changing, the tail was changing and stuff like that. But honestly, I don't understand why in that impression, right, in the big, sort of resin asteroid that it encased itself in, why it wasn't just the same Big Chap that we saw, just somewhat battle damaged. I think that's very odd. I would like, I like it when they give answers to those things, but as we saw in Alien Earth, the series is shooting off in every single direction, and they're not really giving answers to much of anything. They're just sort of throwing more and more questions out there, which is kind of annoying. Anyway, we'll see. Maybe Alien Romulus 2 will, answer some of those questions or get deeper into all of that. Who knows where the series is going really at this point. But let's look into this one. One thing I didn't mention earlier was another reason that I was taken out for a bit of time and wasn't doing videos is that I broke 2 of my ribs. I had a bad fall and busted my ribs, and then I was laying on the floor, and 2 of them were sort of protruding outward on the side, and my toddler did a flying suplex off the bed and actually hit them and reset them. So popped the 7 and 8 ribs back into the false ribs, and since then they've been mending. But my ribs were broken when I was putting the car back together and repairing it. So doing cams, that was difficult because you have a lot of bending over the engine, but the really hard part was rebuilding the reverse compounder, like getting that whole thing out without being in excruciating pain. So it was kind of like, it was a lot of just kind of grinning and bearing it. The figure is primarily the same size as the original, although a lot thinner. The big differences, I think, between this one and the Big Chap that we're all used to is the tubes are slightly curved out more. The back of the head is curved down rather than mimicking the front of the face. The mouth is a little bit smaller, but the only really serious difference is the tail. I don't know why they did this, but this tail is much bonier and much more similar to the Queen's tail, or many of the Romulus designs of the later aliens that we see in it. And that's just really strange to me that they would change that. I just don't see any reason to change it. The tail of the original Big Chap was much more self-contained. It was a lot less bony. The alien from Aliens, the Warrior, had a little bit more like this, but this is really extreme. Like I said, this is more like the Queen's, which would have been an interesting aside if it was molting into a queen or something like that. And that's how they ended up, getting face huggers from it. There's all sorts of things you could play with, but again, it wasn't there on the screen or on paper. The figure comes with, of course, the figure itself and one of the black face huggers, a pair of chest bursters, and a series of different hands. Honestly, there is actually in hand a lot to like about this figure. As a matter of fact, if the proportions of the face and the back of the head and the tail were spot on with the original film, I really like the proportions of the body, how much thinner it is and sleeker. This does look more like Balaji Badeo than I think their other offerings. Now, out of the box, this thing is pretty well articulated, and I'm not feeling the stickiness that you see with some of the figures A lot of the Art the Clowns have been coming apart at the seams, especially in the legs. He's not as stiff as I'm used to with NECA, so that's nice. Like I said, it's a much thinner design than their other Big Chap. You can see here, makes this guy look like a kind of a chunky big boy. The mouth is a ton slimmer. You can see these two next to each other. And again, the back of the head curves down much more like the other Romulus aliens, like the Scorch. Other than that, pretty accurate. The tubes splay outward quite a bit on his back. And again, he's much thinner. So this is an interesting sort of concept what if figure, I guess. And I wonder how far they had gotten with the idea of actually having the Big Chap run around, at least in one sequence, similar to what happens in the comic book. His mouth, of course, opens up, and he has a very small inner mouth. We'll do some close-ups later, but yeah, the inner mouth is much smaller than any other one of these I've seen. This thing is really thin. The tail actually has a very thin feel to it, like it would break easily. Guessing that the wire in here is actually really, really thin. And this is much lighter plastic than, say, the older ones. So it holds its position well, but I don't think this will stand up to like a lot of play. All right, now here it is next to the Mafex and Mezco alien, which are the only other two figures that are really in the 1/12 scale. Unfortunately, there is just no other alien figure that's really close to that scale. And through the pose gallery, we're going to basically look at how it is unadulterated. I haven't done anything to it. Comes with 3 extra sets of hands, so 4 sets total, and honestly is pretty poseable. One of the issues that I had was that the elbows don't want to turn outward very easily. I actually had to pop them off and kind of round off some of the pegs so that it turned properly. So you couldn't really turn it without breaking it at the elbow. Aesthetically, this one actually looks in hand quite a bit different than a lot of the production photos they had. The dome is more sleeked back than bulbous. The proportions are have been a little bit tweaked. So this one's kind of different than what they were proposing a while back, and everything that they changed I actually like. So this figure is a lot cooler looking than I thought it was going to be. Now that being said, the paint applications are simple and the fine details are kind of soft in some places, such as the spurs on the back of his shins are not sheep's bones. There's no real shape there. Next to NECA's other offerings, you can see he's actually the same height. He's exactly the same height, and that's because his midsection is quite longer than any of the other figures. And that's the only thing that actually makes him in scale. They just stretched it out, and it's kind of strange. If you got rid of that midsection, he shrinks down to about the size of the Mezco, maybe just a fraction of an inch taller, but still, he's about that size proportionally in every other way. Arms, the thinness of the legs. He actually makes the Mezco look a little chunky. And next to the Medicom, a lot of his proportions are actually almost identical. So they just sort of stretched him out from 1/12 scale in order to make him in line with their other figures. But honestly, he isn't really a 1/8 scale. His hands are smaller, his facial proportions are smaller. Every single thing about him is quite a bit shrunk down from NECA's earlier versions. And as you can see, all of the main fine details are there, though it's not quite as sharp as some of their other offerings. This one just really, I think, begs to be modified. I think this is maybe the best figure NECA has ever come out with for toy tinkering, especially the fact that most of its joints have no metal pieces or no pins, and they basically just work on friction. So taking him apart is actually really, really simple. There's not a lot that you actually have to break, and a lot of the pieces can be put back together the same way after you're finished modifying them. The biggest difference between this one and the other aliens, other than the tail, is the back of the head. so the tube sort of points down rather than mimics the front of the head like others. And so mostly when you see a big chap, the back portion of the head is sort of the same shape as the jaw and face. It's the same on the both sides, sort of like a canoe. As for hands, he's got a semi-crumpled hand. He's got the classic fingers together. He's got fingers together slightly open and fingers together splayed. But he doesn't have a full finger splayed, similar to what the Mezco comes with. Other accessories he comes with are two different chest bursters, one that's semi-crooked and another that's straight, and of course one of the black face huggers. Again, the proportions for the face hugger seem more in tune with 1/12 scale figures, which is great. As for the chest bursters, there's a lot of detail in these. They seem slightly big for, using with your 1/12 scale figures, but not that big. Honestly, they look close enough to in scale, I think. And they've got a lot of cool little details. I think that these are a lot of fun. There's a fun extra to come with. It's too bad this movie didn't have any eggs, because that would have been a perfect accessory to get with this. But fortunately, because that first one broke, I do have a few Mezco eggs. Now on to the Space Marines and Gridiron Studios. Now, I decided to put these together because honestly, when you look at the Gridiron Studios loadout for Aliens, the first question you're going to have is, what do I have these guys fighting? And there really isn't anything on the market. It's great to have Space Marines gear, but sucks to have them without anything to actually pit them against. And that's why this video pretty much exists, to help you with an idea of what to do about that. Now, each one of these comes in these little Gridiron Studio cardboard-backed packages. They aren't specific to any weapon, so they don't have any packaging. And again, they're sort of a boutique company, and I hope they blow up someday, because I would like to see a lot of the prices on their things coming down. Because they're a boutique company, the prices on these are definitely prohibitive for army building. Here you can see the Space Marines flamethrower, and it's one of the camera eyepiece headsets, which is really cool. It's made of a softer 3D printed plastic, so there's actually quite a bit of bend to these. They don't feel rigid or breakable, which is good. I'm guessing that these are not resin 3D printed, as you can see some of the 3D print lines here and there, but they did a pretty good job sanding and everything. He comes with the knife that you can stab into the table while you freak out Hudson, and of course the pulse rifle. And the pulse rifle is perfect. It is perfect at scale. It's every single detail. One of the funny little things is in the number counter they put GS, so Gridiron Studios. So there's no number on it, but I think you could probably paint that. The helmet is well proportioned, fits really nicely. Again, these would be great to outfit a whole bunch of Valaverse or G.I. Joe figures with. You could have a whole platoon, but honestly, it's going to cost you quite a bit to outfit just as many Marines as there were in Aliens, as each one of these sets with the pulse rifle and the helmet and all that are around $35 plus shipping, and the smart gun set is, I think, around the $45 plus shipping. So it'd be several $100s to outfit an entire crew. Now, a smart weapon pack comes with the armor and the arm attachment. The arm attachment is articulated, and of course the smart gun itself, which has all of the details. The articulated arm is fairly rigid, doesn't feel breakable, has a little ball joint on both ends, and then a collapsible arm, and it attaches to both the smart gun and the vest. Now, the vest fits on with a couple of straps that you can kind of wrap around the figure to keep it in place, which is something I wish they had also done with the other Space Marine vest, which in order to keep closed, you're going to have to either glue or come up with some little rubber band or something. I might create a little strap for it. It also comes with the hat and headpiece combination. You can either use that, or if you want to go with Vasquez's style, where she wasn't wearing a hat, they have just the headpiece separate, so you don't have to have it connected to the hat. I decided to put it on the Yelena Thunderbolts figure, as my local Walmart had them on sale for 20 bucks, and I liked the way that her flight suit looked with the outfit. Now, one way I can see Gridiron Studios making a few extra bucks would be to make some of their 3D prints available in order to do at home. I think that would be great, because then you can just build all of your own. They don't have to, spend all the money on the materials. So, maybe sort of a high price for one print, but then you can print as much as you want. So like $50 per print, and then you can make yourself, 100 of these. But I haven't really looked out there to see if anybody else is doing any sort of 3D prints for Aliens gear. All in all, these are actually really solid. They're all in one color, and I think that, they could stand a little bit of paint and weathering, and maybe, some of the stickers they had to personalize them, to the characters. But I think that it would be pretty easy to put together a big group of Space Marines with this. As a matter of fact, I wish somebody would do a 3D printed APC, because I would really love to put together a huge diorama of, aliens attacking that thing. So here to show the scale difference between the different figures and a standard 1/12 scale figure, I have the Mezco next to one of the Marines, and the Mezco is in perfect 1/12 scale for the Big Chap. And the Medicom is also in perfect scale. So these two are, what you have. The Medicom is extremely fiddly, though, to pose. It's kind of like a model more than a figure. And then here is the standard NECA. And you can see the standard NECA is just way too large to be in scale with this figure. It would have to be some sort of king alien. But now we have the other NECA. Now the new Romulus NECA, his proportions, his hands, his face, all of that are perfectly in scale. He's just a little tall. So in the next section, I will show you what I did about that. Alright, so technically there's no right way to do this, as when you're modifying a figure, you're breaking it, basically. You're breaking it and putting it back together the way that you think it should be. And you're trying to do as little damage as you possibly can. And so with this figure, I've always wanted to get an alien that was in scale with G.I. Joe and Valaverse and all of that, because I thought that Space Marines dioramas would be really cool, and I'm surprised that in all of this time, no one has done a 1/12 scale alien that is really posable. And this is the closest we've gotten. And like I said in a previous video, the rubber is really easily degraded. The pins inside are actually losing tension, especially on this arm. And I don't even move this guy. He's just sat in one place this whole time. This is not really a good solution. So over the years, I've tried to figure out what would be a good solution for this. And I think the best solution is this figure, as it is proportionally pretty much in the 1/12 scale, if you consider the fact that it's only about, like, of his feet, it's only about 1.5 feet taller than him. So if you guess that this guy is about 6 feet tall, then this thing is about 7.5 feet tall, right? So that's like really in line with the films. And so what I ended up doing is shortening the legs a little bit, shortening the cuffs on the hands, and putting a brand new inner mouth, inner jaw inside of him. It's interesting because the tiny mouth that he came with is actually too small for the hole that it goes in, and it perfectly fits the ones from Mezco. It's like he was designed for a proper sized inner jaw, but they decided to go with the weird little spindly one that just doesn't work. As for other modifications, I went ahead and shortened the torso. So what I did is I pulled out the ball cap by heating it up. So one of the things that you're going to need is a heat gun or a hairdryer or some boiling water, but you need to heat it up in order to get the parts apart without breaking them. And then I drilled in with a couple size drill bits and a Dremel, and basically pulled out where the ball cup was, and then created a new one deeper in the chest cavity, which then allowed me to use the same articulation. And so all of his articulation is still there. The hardest part was the cup ball joints that are in the legs, which I had to heat him up, then pull each one of those out, then cut the leg down, then drill down and create a second level for the cup to go back in and seat properly, and then glue it. Now he's actually just as posable as he ever was. He's just quite a bit shorter, and I think in proper proportion. I think the legs maybe could be a tiny bit shorter, but I actually think he's really good. So here for the pose gallery, we have the modified version. And I think that proportionally, especially that midsection, look a lot better This is actually, I think, how he should have been shipped out. Now, the inner mouth is a spare mezco that I had, or actually a couple of spare mezcos. So there's the short and the long version and the closed version that I'll be showing here. He's also next to the mezco egg here. And as you can see, proportionally, he looks a lot like what you would expect to see from an alien figure. I was able to keep almost all of the articulation. The midsection still crunches a bit. You can still crunch it forward and back. It just doesn't crunch forward and back as much as it did when it was a lot longer. I could probably get more movement out of it, but honestly, it's not a section you really pose that often. So I kind of go with the stability over trying to like carve everything down and get more movement out of that. But if you were to get a whole mess of these, you could definitely quickly modify each one, and you could have a bunch of these attacking your Space Marines. This is definitely the best solution for that I think is on the market right now. And at the moment, I'm pretty sure they're going for about 30 bucks on Walmart.com. Here he is next to an average Valaverse figure. And as you can see, this is actually in proper proportion. This is pretty much the size difference between these two, especially the ones attacking in the hive. As a matter of fact, in this shot, you can almost hear off in the distance somewhere someone screaming, "Werspowski, Werspowski." So I'm thinking the next project I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of these parts that I have left over from the mezco deconstruction video where I showed what the problems with this one were, and I'm going to correct it because I'm going to take the mezco chest, right, and the mezco head and the mezco tail and the hands. I'm going to take the lower half plus the arms and basically Frankenstein them together with the mezco parts and see if I can make a proper 1/12 scale Big Chap that won't fall apart. And as you can see, he's still posable completely, just like he was before, right? Like arms and everything still has the same amount. The chest, of course, is not going to bend forward or back as much because it's so much farther up in the cavity where the ball joint meets, and so he's not going to have a lot of crunching forward or whatnot, but I don't think that that's really necessary of the figure. But this one now will stand nicely in scale with your G.I. Joe and mezco figures, and I kind of hope these go on sale because it would be really awesome to like army build a whole bunch. All right, now I am going to save a lot of the work that I did in the figure to show you how I modified it in the next video, which is the one we'll be Frankensteining together a lot of other Aliens parts in order to create what I think will be the best version of the figure and the best version of a posable figure. But this video right now, I'm just kind of showing what I think about the figure overall and what I think could have been done to the figure in order to make it perfect. And I think this is a lot better. This is definitely more what I would have liked to have seen originally. The larger mouth, the proportions, all of that. I really like this figure. So it went from being one of the figures I thought I was going to be most disappointed with as sort of a money grab to one I'm actually quite happy with and would happily display next to, Colonial Marines and whatnot. You can see next to, here he is next to the mezco, so almost the same size. Maybe, he's about half an inch, a little less than half an inch taller. And then you can see him next to just a regular size NECA, which is the size he was before I started working on him. He's actually quite a bit bigger in every respect. This one is actually quite nice, and I look forward to doing some other modifications. In the next video, we will be going over with close-up detail every single thing that I did in order to basically change this one. So I hope you'll join me in that one, and then I'll see you next time. And remember, as always, never stop collecting.